You know this man. He's clever, funny, creative. He lights up the room with charm, confidence, and charisma. But when life gets serious, he vanishes. When a relationship deepens, he panics. When commitment calls, he ghosts. When responsibility shows up, he checks out. He's always almost there, on the verge of success, growth, change. But somehow, he never quite arrives. He talks about his goals, his vision, his next big thing. But nothing sticks, nothing grounds, nothing grows roots. This is the modern man-child, a term we've turned into memes and punchlines. But beneath the joke lies something real and something tragic. Because this isn't just immaturity, this is a soul stuck in delay. A man who's aging but not maturing, moving but not growing, surviving but not becoming. Carl Jung didn't call him a man-child. He called him the Puer Aeternus, Latin for eternal boy. And he didn't see it as just bad behavior or laziness. He saw it as an archetype, a deep, universal pattern in the human psyche, a blueprint. Jung believed that within each of us are ancient figures, archetypes, that shape how we relate to the world, to others, and to ourselves. The Puer Aeternus is one of them, and he lives in men who can't or won't grow up. The eternal boy is a dreamer, a free spirit, magnetic, exciting, idealistic, but he's also avoidant, fearful of depth, afraid of commitment, sacrifice, and pain. He craves freedom, but runs from discipline. He chases novelty, but fears boredom. He wants love, but can't handle intimacy. He starts 1,000 things and finishes none. And what makes this worse? Modern society doesn't challenge this pattern. It feeds it. We live in a world designed to delay maturity. Infinite distractions, endless choices, quick dopamine hits, no clear rites of passage. You don't have to grow up anymore. You just have to look like you are. Dress the part, talk the part, perform the part. And no one will notice you're still lost inside. This video isn't here to shame anyone. It's here to decode what's happening beneath the surface. Because the man-child isn't a villain. He's a reflection of a deeper wound, a deeper fear, a deeper longing. And for many men today, the Puer Aeternus isn't just active. It's in control. In this video, we'll explore what the Puer Aeternus truly is, why so many men today are caught in his grip, how this pattern forms emotionally, culturally, spiritually, and how to finally break free from it. Because what looks like immaturity is often a soul that was never initiated, and what looks like rebellion is often fear in disguise. If you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever loved a man like this, if you've ever feared becoming him, this is for you. Let's begin. Carl Jung didn't just study people. He studied the patterns behind people. The ancient blueprints, the psychological DNA that quietly shape who we are. He called them archetypes, universal figures that exist deep in the human unconscious. The hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the trickster. And among them is the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. The eternal boy doesn't want to grow up. Not because he can't, but because growing up means sacrificing fantasy for truth. The Puer lives in the world of dreams. He is drawn to lightness, freedom, potential, expansion. He's creative, visionary, rebellious, and because of that, he's magnetic. He can talk for hours about ideas, plans, passions. He starts new things constantly, and he often feels destined for something greater. But when it's time to commit, time to build, finish, follow through, he crumbles. Because the eternal boy is terrified of being pinned down, of choosing, of becoming real. Jung described this archetype as someone who resists the weight of the world. And not just in action, but in soul. Responsibility, discipline, stability, they feel like death to him because they threaten the illusion of unlimited freedom. But here's the paradox, that freedom becomes its own prison. The Puer floats, but floating isn't flying, it's drifting. He avoids grounding, avoids failure, avoids being known, seen, and shaped. Because all of that requires effort. It requires ego death. And the Puer fears that more than anything. Let's talk contrast. Every archetype has a light and a shadow. And the Puer's light side? It's beautiful. He's the inner child who dares to dream. The spark that refuses to conform. He brings freshness, innovation, courage. But his shadow? It's hollow. Because without depth, his dreams collapse. Without structure, his rebellion becomes stagnation. Without commitment, his charm becomes manipulation. You can see this everywhere. The influencer who preaches hustle but lives in chaos. The artist who never finishes anything. The guy who says, "I'm not ready to settle down for the 10th year in a row." He says he's exploring, but really, he's escaping. Pop culture is full of Puers. Peter Pan is the classic image, ruler of Neverland, forever boy surrounded by other lost boys. He fears growing up, avoids Wendy's love, and flies away rather than feel. Or look at the Joker, a darker version. A chaotic inner child whose pain is masked by performance. A man who never healed and became destruction instead. Even in music and film, many pop icons embody this archetype. They live like gods, but crack under pressure. Addiction, scandal, self-sabotage, it's all there. The Puer is adored by the world, but he cannot bear to stay in it. Jung wrote, "He dreams of flying, but fears walking." The Puer longs for transcendence, without transformation. He wants to be exceptional, without becoming responsible. He wants to be seen, without being vulnerable. And that's what makes this archetype so dangerous, because it doesn't look like failure. It looks like promise, like potential, like almost greatness, but almost can ruin a life. This isn't just a symbolic idea. The Puer shows up in real men, in everyday life. You might see him in the man who jumps from one career to the next, never settling, never building. The boyfriend who pours his heart out one week, then disappears the next. The guy who's always rebranding, always starting over, always about to launch something. He doesn't lack intelligence, he doesn't lack creativity. What he lacks is integration. The courage to descend from the clouds, plant his feet, and walk the path of becoming. But here's what most people miss. The Puer is not evil. He's not something to hate or shame. He's a phase. A necessary, powerful, creative stage of development. But only if you move through him, not live inside him forever. The real tragedy isn't that the Puer exists. It's that many men are never shown how to evolve beyond him. In the next chapter, we'll trace his roots. Where does this archetype come from? What wounds shape it? What culture reinforces it? And what keeps so many men from stepping into adulthood? Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. Let's find out. To understand why so many men today are emotionally stuck, why they fear commitment, run from responsibility, and stay trapped in potential, we have to go deeper than just behavior. We need to explore the root system. The man-child isn't born overnight. He is shaped, slowly, silently, by the environment around him. Through childhood wounds, through cultural conditioning, through emotional patterns that get reinforced over and over again. In this chapter, we'll break down the 6 major forces that form the foundation of the eternal boy archetype, what Carl Jung called the Puer Aeternus. 1. Childhood wounds. Overprotection, absence, and the missing rite of passage. It begins in the home. Some boys grow up with overprotective mothers. Loving, yes, but controlling. She solves every problem before it arrives. She shields him from pain. She never lets him fail. And while this might feel like care, what he really learns is, I'm not capable on my own. Now add to that a father who's absent, physically or emotionally. He doesn't offer discipline, doesn't model masculinity, doesn't challenge the boy to grow, so there's no balance, no initiation, no one to say, this is your test, face it, you're ready. He grows older, but inside he remains emotionally unformed. A boy waiting for someone to make him a man. Number 2. Jung's mother complex. Emotional dependence and rejection of structure. Carl Jung called this dynamic the mother complex. When a boy remains too psychologically tied to the mother archetype, he struggles to develop his independent self. He becomes emotionally dependent. He seeks nurturing in all his relationships, romantic, professional, even spiritual. He wants someone else to hold the structure for him. And worse, he may start to resent that structure, sabotage it, because it feels like control, when in reality, it's exactly what he needs to grow. The mother complex makes him afraid of becoming his own father, so he stays a child, even in a grown man's body. Number 3. Cultural reinforcement. Delayed adulthood and the worship of youth. Even if he wanted to grow, our culture gives him no roadmap. There are no more initiations, no mentors, no community that says, you are not a boy anymore. Instead, we glorify delayed adulthood. We tell men to stay flexible, avoid commitment, keep their options open. We reward performance over presence. We mock seriousness, and we treat emotional numbness as normal. The result? A generation of men who don't know what it means to cross the threshold into grounded maturity. 4. The dopamine loop, novelty over depth. Now hand that boy a smartphone and you've locked the cycle in. Every time he feels boredom, fear, or discomfort, he reaches for stimulation. Scroll, swipe, escape. Social media, video games, YouTube rabbit holes, porn, Tinder, it's all the same loop. He never has to feel pain, never has to face himself, never has to go inward because there's always something new. But over time, that novelty becomes numbness, the nervous system gets fried, and real life, real depth starts to feel boring, even threatening. 5. Fear of failure, perfectionism, and the ideal self. Now here's where it gets more personal. This man isn't lazy, he's terrified. Not of trying, but of what trying might reveal. Deep down he holds an ideal self, a version of himself that's destined for greatness. But if he really tries and fails, that fantasy dies. So instead he becomes a perfectionist, always planning, always preparing, never acting. The man-child is not lazy, he's terrified of falling from his ideal self, and so he protects the fantasy at the cost of his reality. Number 6. Comfort over challenge. The silent killer of growth. Finally, we arrive at the modern poison, comfort. Comfort sounds like peace, but for the eternal boy, it's death disguised as safety. He builds a life that avoids all friction. No hard conversations, no delayed gratification, no consistent routines, no emotional risk. He mistakes comfort for self-love, but all it really does is stall his evolution, because growth only happens in discomfort. And until he learns to choose it, he stays locked in the very boyhood he's desperate to escape. So now we see the full picture. A boy raised in overprotection, abandoned by challenge, shaped by culture, numbed by dopamine, terrified of failure, and addicted to comfort. He becomes the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. Not because he wants to stay small, but because no one ever taught him how to grow tall. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when this fear turns into fantasy. When the man-child stops trying to grow and starts building illusions to live in. Fantasy can feel like freedom, but it's often just a prettier prison. Let's talk about escape and what he's really running from. At first glance, he looks free. No rules, no boss, no relationship tying him down. No one to answer to. He's a wanderer, a creator, a free spirit. But the truth? He's not free. He's hiding. And the world he's hiding in isn't made of walls. It's made of fantasy. A perfectly curated illusion that looks like freedom, but quietly cages him from the inside out. The eternal boy doesn't want a boring life. He wants adventure, greatness, intensity. But over time, life begins to demand things from him. Consistency, emotional depth, follow-through, patience. And instead of rising to that challenge, he escapes it. Through games, through porn, through fantasies of success, through endless planning with no execution. He avoids the reality of becoming a man by building a world where he never has to face it. This is the illusion of rebellion. He tells himself he's anti-system, that he's not like the others, that he's refusing the path because he's meant for something bigger. But if you look closer, he's not walking another path. He's not on any path at all. He's just circling. He's addicted to beginnings, new projects, new partners, new ideas, but he fears the middle, fears the plateau, fears the grind that turns fantasy into something real. So he stays in the high of starting and never crosses the threshold of becoming. Let's get real. This is where addiction creeps in, quietly, not just chemical addiction, but emotional escape. He turns to gaming because it gives him a sense of achievement, without risk. He turns to porn because it simulates intimacy, without vulnerability. He turns to social media because it creates identity without effort. He turns to spirituality or philosophy, not to transform, but to perform. He collects ideas, not insights, words, not wisdom, because deep down, he fears what will happen when the fantasy ends. And here's what no one tells you. Fantasy is not harmless. The more time you spend in it, the more fragile reality becomes. A man who lives in fantasy starts to believe he's exceptional, but has no real feedback from the world to prove or shape that. So when reality finally pushes back, through heartbreak, failure, rejection, he can't handle it. He crumbles. He lashes out. He retreats even further into the illusion. This isn't just emotional immaturity. It's emotional paralysis. And that paralysis often shows up in tantrums disguised as logic. He says things like, "The world isn't ready for me. People just don't understand. I'm not meant for the 9 to 5. I'm spiritual, not material. It's not the right time. I'm still working on myself." And sure, some of that might be true, but often it's just the ego trying to protect the image of greatness, while avoiding the work of becoming great. There's often a moment that reveals this truth. A relationship starts to deepen, and he disappears. A job demands more, and he sabotages. A friend calls him out, and he cuts them off. It's not that he doesn't care, it's that his nervous system has never been trained to stay. He mistakes discomfort for danger, responsibility for control, intimacy for entrapment, and so he escapes, again. Here's a real-world example. A man who's endlessly starting businesses. He's passionate, driven, always rebranding, but as soon as things stabilize, he crashes it. Ghosts his team, starts from scratch. Why? Because chaos feels safer than success. As long as he's starting, he doesn't have to risk being exposed. As long as he's in motion, he doesn't have to feel stillness. Stillness might reveal the truth. He doesn't know who he is, outside of performance. This is the man-child's cage. Not made of failure, but of almost. Almost ready. Almost stable, almost real. He lives in the illusion of becoming, but never becomes. And the longer he stays in fantasy, the more disconnected he becomes from life, from others, and from himself. But here's the key. Fantasy isn't evil. It's a place to visit, not live in. It can inspire, it can fuel dreams, but if it replaces action, commitment, and presence, it becomes a cage made of light, beautiful, but empty. In the next chapter, we'll confront the part of him that hides beneath the illusion, the part he refuses to look at, the part that controls him more than any fantasy ever could. We'll explore the shadow, and why facing it is the first real step toward growing up. Are you ready? Let's turn toward the dark. What does the man-child fear most? Not failure, not responsibility, not even commitment. He fears himself. Not the polished version he shows the world, but the raw, repressed, chaotic version that lives in the dark. Carl Jung called this part of the psyche the shadow, the unconscious side of the self, the part we exile, deny, and avoid, but which still controls us. The man-child has a very active shadow. He just doesn't know it, because the more he avoids responsibility, the louder it becomes. The more he chases freedom, the more it tightens around him. The more he rejects pain, the more he suffers. So what lives in his shadow? Let's break it down. Beneath his charm, you'll often find anger. Beneath his idealism, you'll find shame. Beneath his detachment, there's usually a deep longing to be loved. He doesn't know how to hold these things, so he buries them. And like anything buried alive, they come back, distorted. The result? He becomes passive-aggressive. He lashes out, then retreats. He gets triggered by criticism. He crumbles under pressure. And worst of all, he blames everyone else for the storm inside him. This is projection. When a man refuses to meet his shadow, he starts to see it everywhere except in himself. He'll say, "She's too emotional. That boss is too controlling. People are fake. The system is rigged. It's their fault I feel this way." But these reactions aren't about the world. They're about the parts of himself he's not willing to confront. Jung said it best, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The man-child doesn't know he's at war with himself, because he's never been taught to listen to his shadow, only to suppress it. And here's the truth most men aren't told. Your shadow is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It holds your pain, yes, but it also holds your power, your edge, your fire, your ability to protect, create, and evolve. It's not there to destroy you, it's there to complete you, but only if you face it. The problem is, he was never given the tools. So what does it take to begin shadow work? Start with this. Radical honesty. When you get triggered, pause. Ask, what part of me feels threatened? What story am I telling myself? Where have I felt this before? Next, stop moralizing your emotions. Anger isn't evil. Envy isn't failure. Jealousy isn't weakness. They are signals. They're not meant to be acted out, but they are meant to be understood. Don't run. Don't numb. Don't shame yourself. Feel it. Write it. Speak it. Because the more you bring your shadow into the light, the less power it has over you. You can't grow into a whole man without confronting your darkness. If you avoid your shadow, you stay trapped in emotional adolescence. You keep projecting, keep running, keep performing. But when you face it, you grow teeth. Not to bite, but to protect what's real in you. Let me give you an example. A man gets dumped. He spirals, tells himself she was unstable, too emotional, not loyal. But when he finally sits with the pain without distraction, he realizes he was never really present. He kept one foot out the door. He feared intimacy, so he kept testing her until she gave up. That's shadow work. Painful, humbling, but liberating. Because now, he can choose differently. Not react, respond, not perform, integrate. Jung said, where your fear lies, there your task begins. And for the eternal boy, that task is always the same. To turn toward the part of himself he's never met. Not to destroy the boy, but to evolve him. Not to kill the fire, but to channel it. In the next chapter, we'll explore the final frontier that keeps the man-child stuck, the distorted relationship with the feminine. Because no matter how much he works on himself, if he doesn't understand the anima, the inner woman, he'll keep repeating the same patterns in love, in longing, and in loss. Let's talk about relationships. And why he's afraid of intimacy, not because he doesn't care, but because it demands everything his ego can't control. He says he wants love, connection, depth, intimacy, but the moment it starts to feel real, he pulls away. He was so present until it got too close. He was romantic, attentive, even intense, until she needed consistency, until she expected him to show up emotionally, not just charmingly. And suddenly, he's gone. Or worse, he stays, but only halfway. Hot, cold, open, withdrawn, passionate, then silent. This is the anima wound. In Jungian psychology, the anima is the man's inner feminine, his emotional soul, his capacity for vulnerability, connection, and love. Every man carries an anima within him, and if it remains immature or distorted, he will struggle to relate to real women, because he hasn't yet made peace with the woman inside himself. So what happens when the anima is undeveloped? Two things. He either idealizes women, or he fears them. Sometimes both. He turns women into goddesses, muses, therapists, saviors. He falls in love with the idea of them, the version that meets his emotional needs without ever challenging his ego. But when they disappoint him, when they show flaws, emotions, strength, he panics, he pulls away, or he tries to control. Because real intimacy demands something his inner world isn't ready to give. Emotional maturity. Carl Jung warned that if the anima is not integrated, she operates unconsciously. She seduces, manipulates, reacts. She creates emotional chaos within the man and then projects it onto his partner. He'll say, she's too much, she's too emotional, she's suffocating me. But what he's really saying is, I don't know how to hold space for what I haven't held inside myself. This leads to emotional dependency, which the man-child often mistakes for passion. He says he's deeply connected, but really, he's deeply entangled. He swings from worship to rejection, from obsession to detachment, from you complete me to you're draining me. Because it's not love. It's a search for the mother he never emotionally separated from, and a woman he expects to make him whole. One of the most dangerous patterns that shows up here is the Madonna whore complex. He splits women into two roles, the perfect, pure, idealized love, and the chaotic, sexual, threatening feminine. He can't hold both in one person. So he idealizes one, objectifies the other. Why? Because he hasn't yet accepted the complexity of his own inner feminine. He wants simplicity, predictability, safety. But love isn't safe. It's expansive, messy, demanding. It calls forward the very emotions he spent his life avoiding. Let's make this real. Imagine a man who's been in 3 serious relationships. Each one starts like a movie. He's deeply present at first, romantic, attuned. But by month 4, something shifts. She starts asking for more. Emotional presence, long-term thinking, commitment. And suddenly his body says run. Not because she's wrong, but because her presence is pulling forward the part of him he's never faced. And rather than face it, he blames her, sabotages the connection, retreats into needing space. This is why shadow work alone isn't enough. Because without anima work, the man-child will continue recycling relationships, each time convinced the problem is out there, when really it's in here. So how does a man begin to heal this? First, he has to stop looking for emotional rescue. His partner is not his mother, not his savior, not his therapist. She can support him, but she cannot fix what he refuses to feel. Second, he must build emotional literacy, not just naming feelings, but staying with them. Fear, longing, tenderness, insecurity, the things he spent years numbing, avoiding, intellectualizing. Third, he must develop boundaries, internally and externally. Because love without boundaries becomes fusion, and fusion kills polarity, kills safety, kills real intimacy. Jung said, he cannot love because he has not loved his own soul. The anima is the bridge to that soul, to a deeper, more grounded way of relating, to love that isn't based on fantasy or fear, but on truth. The eternal boy often thinks he's afraid of losing himself in love, but really, he's afraid of finally being found, because to be seen, fully, nakedly, emotionally, requires a strength no fantasy can offer. In the next chapter, we bring it all together. Because if he wants to grow, really grow, it's time to step beyond the dream, beyond the fear, and into a new identity. We'll talk about structure, initiation, purpose, and the real transformation that begins when the boy finally chooses to become a man. Let's walk that path together. The man-child doesn't need more potential. He has plenty. What he needs is initiation. The path forward isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to grow, even when it's uncomfortable, unclear, or unfamiliar. Because maturity doesn't arrive. It's built, brick by brick, choice by choice. So how does the eternal boy become a man? It starts with one word, integration. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. Not perfect, not socially acceptable, but authentically, powerfully you. And that requires reclaiming everything you've rejected. Your ambition, your fear, your rage, your longing, your tenderness, your structure, all of it. No more split self, no more ideal self, just you, grounded and evolving. But individuation isn't abstract, it demands action. Structure is liberation. The boy thinks structure is a prison. The man knows it's what sets him free. Routine, discipline, delayed gratification, follow-through. These are not enemies, they are the tools that shape chaos into character. Without structure, freedom becomes drift. With structure, freedom becomes direction. Then comes self-initiation. Because if the world won't initiate you, you must initiate yourself. That means doing hard things, setting emotional boundaries, sitting with discomfort, getting therapy, joining men's groups, saying no when it's easier to say yes, and saying yes to the things your fear tells you to avoid. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You become the one who shows up. The boy chases intensity. The man builds stability. The boy escapes. The man endures. The boy wants to be chosen. The man chooses himself. This shift isn't loud. It's not dramatic, but it's real. It's felt in the quiet moments, when you stay grounded during conflict, when you follow through on your word, when you let go of fantasy, and finally face what's real. Jung said, the true man is not the one who conquers others, but the one who conquers himself. That's the path. Not dominance, not ego. Integrity. That's what the world is starving for. Not more men performing masculinity, but men embodying wholeness. So if you've seen yourself in this journey, you're not behind. You're awakening. The boy was never the problem. Staying him forever was. In the final chapter, we bring it home, not with shame, but with a clear call to rise, to choose, to become. Let's close this with what matters most, soul. The man-child isn't just a modern trend, he's a mirror, reflecting a deeper crisis we rarely talk about. He's not weak, not broken, he's unfinished. A boy who was never truly guided into manhood, raised on comfort, rewarded for charm, taught to avoid pain and call it peace. And now, He floats, avoiding structure, escaping intimacy, drowning in potential, but never arriving. But here's the truth. He's not the enemy. The eternal boy is a signal that something inside you is still waiting to grow, still afraid to choose, still hiding from the life that would shape you. This isn't about shame, it's about sight, because when you see the pattern, you can finally break it. You don't fix the man-child by pretending to be strong. You heal him by becoming whole. And that means doing the quiet, gritty, soul-deep work. Facing your shadow, owning your fear, reclaiming your power without the mask. Carl Jung said, "You are not what happened to you, you are what you choose to become." And you? You still get to choose. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because the world doesn't need more boys pretending to be men. It needs men who've walked through their own fire and came out with soul. If this spoke to something in you, subscribe to Psytheon. We don't do surface-level self-help here. We explore Jungian psychology, masculine growth, and inner transformation, deeply, honestly, spiritually. Like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're ready to become more than you've been, your initiation starts now.